I think it's a mixture of Chelsea growing pains and change is difficult, and moving from one era to the next, moving from one identity to the next. I mean, I think it was never going to be sort of a smooth transition. I mean, I feel very strongly that Sarri's year was a very critical year in Chelsea's history, recent modern history, because I think it showed us why we needed to change. And why we needed to think about the direction of the club, what was actually going to be the long-term plan. That short-term thinking wasn't going to solve our problems, that keeping to the same cycle was going to leave us trading further and further behind the likes of Man City and Liverpool. We had a great youth academy. The transfer ban was a blessing in disguise. I think there's a bit of that. And also, in a weird, this season has been so up and down. It's been a roller coaster season. In terms of emotion, I've never experienced. Maybe the 11-12 season for emotion was sort of rivaled this. In terms of just going almost at times a weekly basis, feeding one high and then low, high and then low. I mean, I think that's also difficult for fans. It's very easy in August to go where behind the youth, we're behind Frank's revolution, we're behind all of this, and then when actually you watch results and you're emotionally invested within your team, there's just a realism of being a fan that's what you get into, and you feel and as being Chelsea fans, watching us be so successful and consistently successful, I think it was difficult watching us lose to Bournemouth, lose to Southampton at home, teams like that.
But that's the thing though, is it really, knowing that we've lost those same clubs under Sarri and Conte as well, and Mourinho? So it's about the perspective. At what point, I mean, if anything, understanding that this was going to be a team that has so many young players, making the step up from the Championship to a top 4 level, you'd think that maybe there'd be more like patience behind things and maybe some more understanding. But I don't know. The impression I get is that in a stadium, that is that. People really get behind the players and stuff. But maybe, I just think it's typical of internet culture in general, not even just with football, but with anything. It does create a lot of reactionary opinions and takes.
Luckily, we've got a manager, and I think this is the best thing. And Lampard said it earlier in the season, as he used the Kevin De Bruyne example, and I think it was right after the Spurs win, and they were asking him about in December. He was asking him about sort of the young players, how well they'd done, how they'd started in a game. And he said, as a club, maybe 5 years ago, we would have just, not allowed these players into the first team. Mourinho would have binned Christian Pulisic likely. I mean, that's something I've been thinking about recently. Like, I think considering the start he had and considering the way Lampard dealt with Christian Pulisic compared to, I think, the way Jose Mourinho would have dealt with Christian Pulisic, different eras, different times, yes, and Jose won us a league title the next season. But I think there's that as well. Like, for me, it's I don't understand sort of how people can look at Tammy, for instance, and say with 18 goals when everyone was thought, would he even be good enough to start for Chelsea week in, week out, to then turn around and go, he's not good enough. And it's like, same with Callum Hudson-ODOI, same with Mason Mount, same with Reece James. Like, these are players that if we were to sell them tomorrow and Tammy goes and bangs 25 goals for Liverpool in a couple of seasons, people will be outraged at the club. Like, for what are you doing? Why are you selling these young players? We cannot keep on falling into the same traps we've been falling into for a number of years now. And that's the good thing about Lampard and Jody Morris, is they have staff there that want to give these players time and opportunities. And that's, I think, a positive thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree, man. I don't know. It is quite disappointing. And I think the reason why I'm really annoyed by it is the fact that it's okay to have a different opinion if you think, maybe a certain player you feel maybe, I don't think that he'll become a top 4 striker, whatever. Okay. But when you then turn that towards like hate, when you're then adding Tammy Abraham to let him know that, I mean, why? And the reason why you're doing that is because you're anonymous. Your details aren't there, your face isn't there. And there's a big difference between accounts that don't show their face and accounts that have their face out there. It's a massive difference with that. And I don't know, I just feel like, to keep it real, I think there's a sort of ignorance at times. I feel like people only look at things from a 2D perspective, in the sense that it's purely based on aesthetics. Now, for me, I look at Tammy Abraham, I know that, okay, he's been a striker who banged in the goals for Aston Villa, at Bristol City, that would only play inside the box. He'd finish moves, like a Muller, all the way back in the day, playing for Germany. That's stylistically the type of striker Tammy was. Of course, this season, Lampard wants to improve his overall game. Tammy's learning at the same time, just how every single young player does. They have to learn to improve. And learning throughout the season, he's got 18 goals. Now, of course, there's times where, his first touch looks a bit off, but, the reality is when you're playing with your back to goal against, 29-year-old Premier League defender who's like 6'3", of course, it's not going to be perfect. And I can't expect a 22-year-old who isn't even fully physically developed to have that strength just now to just hold off someone like that. I mean, look at Didier Drogba. He was a prime example, actually. And maybe if I'm Tammy Abraham, I'd really look towards Drogba's career and his trajectory. I mean, when he started off, he was that type of striker, a fox in the box type of thing. And then, of course, Marseille, he's starting to get a bit older, around 26 years old, approaching a bit of a prime. Physically, he's ready. He's holding opponents off with his chest, which was, just like that world-class thing Drogba could do. And then when he came to Chelsea, it took him a year and a half to adapt to playing as that type of target man in the team, because he was never a target man playing for Marseille. And once he got past that, in the end, when he was like 27, 28, you could see he became a fully complete player that could, do that part of the game, hold someone off and play people in. He could make a run in behind and, get him the end to finish off a move. He could play people in as well. He could run down the channels. And that is the whole plan, to develop a young player and get them at that level. So I feel there's just like a critical misunderstanding sometimes from a lot of fans. And I think it comes down to maybe that lack of knowledge. And I'm not saying that in a sense where it's like, oh, I'm from such a high position, or you cretins, I don't know what you're talking about. Nah, not like that. But just on a real, I think a lot of times it is based on a lot of ignorance and misunderstanding of how football is, how football works. And maybe if we want to have a deeper conversation, it comes down to maybe how the game is marketed. I think we mentioned at the start, with the sensationalism, traditional media, these pros that come on, they don't really inform. All they do is just speak on what I can see for myself. Then, of course, maybe it gets people thinking that, okay, this is how the game is. Maybe it's not that deep. And, that's why they can't even distinguish the fact that Tammy at 22 won't be the same as Tammy at 26.
It's a big frustration. I mean, I think that Tammy's had an incredible season. I think it's very easy now because Giroud done so well. And I think as well, the break from the pandemic, made us I think it's easy to forget how well Tammy played going through the season, how many big goals he scored for us. It very much was the first part of the season was his part of the season. The second part of the season was Giroud's part of the season.
Yeah.
I think, the biggest criticism I could have of Tammy is his anticipation across with balls that go across the box. I think he could be a lot better at that. As you've mentioned, his all-round play, and also maybe just if he gets more game time next season, spreading out those goals a bit more. I think that's the big thing. But 18 goals is ridiculous for me, really, considering what people... You got to remember what people were saying about him in August, and we didn't even know who the main striker was going to be based off pre-season. I mean, it could have been Giroud. It could have even been Batshuayi, as ridiculous as that sounds now. Because Frank gave all of them quite equal opportunity, even though Tammy got the number 9 shirt. And the weight of that number 9 shirt at Chelsea, Tammy's just taken it in his stride. It's like it hasn't bothered him. And, I think that 18 goals, which is what, funny enough, to talk about stats, XG predicted, I think, 18 goals for him this season. And he matched that. So I think definitely next season he can improve.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had Tammy on 18 goals for the season, so I'm happy that he was able to meet that mark. And for me, the fact that I could even assume that he'd get to 18 goals, and he did, sums up the potential that he has. And I think when you speak about these young guys, you have to speak about potential. You can't just keep focusing on what they're doing right now. I mean, how many examples in football are there of, let's say, for example, a Calvert-Lewin? He's been playing consistently for 2-3 seasons. It's taken him until his 3rd season to start showing some form. And Tammy's outscored him in his first season. Richarlison, we've seen him miss opportunities for how long? And at times, maybe he doesn't take enough shots due to the positions he gets into. You've seen the dramatic improvement in his game, but that only came from consistently playing at Watford and then his first season at Everton as well. And, all these strikers, but I see these, I have to just be honest, these nonsense comparisons like I saw with Jimenez. I'm just thinking, I saw Jimenez when he signed for Atletico Madrid. He was not anywhere near ready at the same age that Tammy is playing for us. Lewandowski too, back in the day when Dortmund used to have this I think Brazilian striker that played for them. Then they signed Lewandowski, and then it took Lewandowski maybe 2 seasons to become that full proper first team striker at Dortmund that was setting the ball on. I don't know, for me, if you if you watch the game a lot, like watch different games, that's really like delve into it. I feel like you would never even think to make like outlandish definitive claims on a player's ability, and just understanding that, okay, this is the nature of how the game actually works. It's not supposed to be like that. And if you're going to keep comparing these young players to like your, actual once in a generation players like your Mbappe's, I know that term is thrown around loosely because it gets a lot of clicks on social media, but players like that, they only come once in a while. You know what I mean? They're just so good that they're, you can't really compare them. Messi's too, you can't compare them. So I don't know. I think Tammy, you mentioned that point about his anticipation inside the box. I've seen him score a lot of goals inside the box. I think the reality is, first season leading the line, it's not just about the like the physical game or the technical game, but it's also the mental game as well. You have to know that, are you feeling confident in that moment? Are you trusting like the ball is being played into you as well? Because a lot of times it's a bit of both. Let's say there's been a few times where crosses have been played in behind him, and it can make it hard to really understand, okay, where's this ball actually going to be placed? And I think that only really comes with more time and experience playing in the league, because I've, again, strikers around this age missed tons of opportunities like that. To give you another example, Gabriel Jesus. I mean, he's been at City for how long? His first 2-3 seasons, he was regularly missing opportunities like that. So I don't know. I just think it's quite unfair, to be honest. And if anything, Tammy's really impressed me with his mentality. The racist abuse, constant negativity from the fan base towards him, constant doubts, trying to really discredit him. And I guess that's, for me, that's the one thing that really just bugs me out the most, is how can you support this club and feel entitled to really abuse the players that you're hoping are going to get you the 3 points every single damn week?
I think it's more of an online thing than a fan thing. I actually think the fans in Stamford Bridge on a regular basis, because I think luckily this year the actual feeling inside Stamford Bridge when the times we were allowed in the stadium was quite unified, very unified, much more unified than previous seasons. And I think that's the positive thing. Unfortunately, social media, we could go off on a big tangent about what could be done around abuse and stuff like that. So it's that's unfortunately a thing that comes with it, and it's like most fans would probably have the same conversation we've just had about put a player in that gets abuse on a regular basis. That's unfortunately something that's just a wider problem than just Chelsea, isn't it? But before we wrap up the conversation, I just want to quickly talk and ask you about next season. What are your expectations for next season? Because I think after this season, wrapping up Champions League football, getting Champions League qualification, it's going to be quite a congested year. We're not that far away from the start of the season. What do you expect? Do you think about a title challenge? Would you like to see Chelsea, maybe if that's not realistic, third, maybe second? How would you see next season playing out?
I mean, that's a good one. I've thought about this a lot. So I think first thing I have to think of is my rivals for next season. I'm looking at someone like an Arsenal. I don't think they'll be anywhere near close to top 4 for next season, so they're out. I'm looking at Manchester United, and I think it was always obvious, especially to me, that Sancho was never going to sign. He cost too much money, way too much money. And if anything, even if you sign him, is there enough balance in that United team that could accommodate having, a player like that without investing in another midfield player, another defender, etc., etc.? So I feel like under Solskjaer too, potentially, if he's not on point, could get sacked. And if that was to happen next season, United will go on for another manager, maybe a Pochettino, who then has to redo everything again. When that could take them out from really mounting a title challenge themselves. And to then move on to Liverpool, as we've seen near the second half of the season, I feel like they weren't that same superpower like they were at the start. I felt like maybe teams started to cope a bit more against them and understood how to play against them, and they picked up a few more losses and defeats. And traditionally with Klopp, it'll be his 4th season at Dortmund. Everything really capitulated because, again, it's modern day football. When clubs have their analysts, their teams, they're constantly looking how to break you down. And the thing is, most clubs only play against a team twice in a season, so you're not going to really see that evolution. But there's always a difference between the first game and the second game. So if you consider that, by the time next season comes, a lot of these teams could be playing Liverpool for the 5th time, the 6th time. They're going to be able to cope against them a bit better. So I think considering the fact that Liverpool can't really spend too much money as well. You know, they were priced out for Werner, which is terrible for them. It seems like they can't even afford Thiago, who, if I'm Klopp, if you don't get Thiago in your midfield, that is going to really affect a lot of what you do for next season. I feel like they might not be that same superpower themselves. And then, of course, with Man City, I think a lot of what they do depends on the market. And I don't see them spending like us. I think they have the same funds to do that. So I think that there is definitely a possibility that we can mount a title challenge. If we don't win the league, I don't think it would mean it's a failure. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe three clubs like us, Man City, Liverpool, the points gap was very close. Like maybe like, I don't know, 5 points difference between like maybe third and second, and maybe like, you know, another 4 points between like first and second. I mean, I think now that a lot of these teams are reaching their peaks and now that we're reinvesting, just even considering like other European leagues too and how the final league structures are, I feel like it's going to be a lot closer for many teams. So right now, I don't even think there's really a favorite. I just think that it's honestly going to come down to, you know, who has the best form consistently and how the final few days of the season are looking.
I feel like a title challenge for me, I'd like some sort of title challenge like you. I'm not really, it's not my sort of big, if we don't get a title, you know, obviously go right to the final days of the title and, you know, win the title. It's, for me, my big thing for Chelsea next season is to be out of the slog for Champions League qualification. That's my big thing for Chelsea. And if it means we're third, and because of results we're comfortably third, then I think that's progress. I think that for me, just being in the slog for Champions League qualification for a full season in a row would just, I just don't want to see it, because I think it's been so repetitive. And I think the hope is with Lampard improving the squad, we'll have enough to get ahead of those other teams that are in maybe rebuilding phases like Tottenham and Arsenal, and potentially get more points. I also want to see us, you know, get more points against Liverpool and get more points against Man City, you know, really start to test them a bit more and bury the teams we're supposed to at home. I mean, that's the big thing, is breaking down low blocks. Is I think sort of everyone will talk about, you know, beating the bigger teams, but I think if we can break down low blocks, then I think within a couple of seasons we could really have a serious chance of lifting a Premier League title.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with that, man. I think this season in particular too, if we were able to break these teams down a lot better, I think we could have even survived with how our current team is defensively. I think that just the fact that scoring the first goal tends to give you a massive advantage, that you can, you know, control the game. You can open up the teams up as well. And as we've seen throughout the season, most times when we get the first goal, we do end up getting a positive result near the end, because that way we can maybe sit back a bit deeper. Then our like amazing transitional football comes into full effects. And, you know, like against Man City as a prime example, you know, I think that's always been the game plan. But of course, it does come down to the execution from the players on the field. So I don't know, you know, when you're signing guys like Ziyech, Werner and Kai, I mean, that's adding at least how many goals? Another 30 goals to your team. So I think there's definitely a lot of positives to come for next season. But for us to be like the guaranteed favorite, because there's a difference between challenging and being the favorite, I think that we are going to need maybe another season of like maybe reinvesting big in maybe two key areas, like maybe another big midfield player, maybe another big you know, defensive player too, or goalkeeper, depending on what happens during this market. So I think that you know, there still is that 3-year plan. We are trying to like accelerate things this season to close the gap a lot more, but that plan is still there. And it seems like right now, the club structures, environment, and just the feel-good vibes, it feels like we actually are going to stick to plan now and let a manager have time to mold something and do something.
I feel like next season can be, even if it's not, you know, title challenge, even though, you know, I think that next season, attacking wise, I think is going to be maybe one of the best we've seen at Chelsea. I've just got that sense. Defensively, we're not sure. You know, it could be a bit like Liverpool still in their early years under Klopp, where we're still susceptible to mistakes because we aren't able to get all the defensive signings. But I do think it's going to be very exciting, and I think we can see some real attacking play there that makes us think that with a couple more additions we can be there. And I think Lamps will definitely have the team, hopefully more certain next season. So thank you so much, mate, for coming on and having a discussion today. Great topics to discuss and debate. I hope you guys enjoyed watching and listening to it as well. Just before I go, as I do with all my guests, I'm sure most of the people watching this and listening to this will know who you are. Just give you a chance to shout out where people can find your work online.
Thanks, man. If you guys want to find me on Twitter, my @ is NiiNiiFC, and of course, my YouTube channel is BlueLionsTV. So I release regular content daily, match reviews, news videos, previews, talking points, all that type of stuff. So if you want mentioned football conversation, I'm your guy.
Defo, man. All the links to NiiNii's work will be in the description box below. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.